The wind shifted like a whisper across the plains, carrying dust and old songs no one sang anymore. Calder sat alone at his table, elbows resting on the wood smoothed by years of silent meals. A stew simmered nearby, barely touched. Across from him, an empty chair sat in solemn protest, its worn seat still holding the shape of the woman he'd buried last winter. Her voice had once filled this kitchen with soft fire. Now, even the stove hesitated to speak. Just as the sun dropped behind the ridge, a knock broke the hush. Not a timid one. 3 steady raps, like someone asking to be remembered. He opened the door to a tall woman with a wide-brimmed hat shadowing her eyes. She had dust on her coat and weariness in her bones, but she stood like someone who refused to kneel for anything but mercy. Behind her, half hidden, was a girl, maybe 9, eyes too quiet for her age, fingers clutching a frayed doll that looked more patched than whole. "I was told you need a cook," the woman said, voice dry but steady. Calder didn't answer right away. He studied her face, pale beneath the dust, lips chapped by travel, jaw set with something like defiance. The child peeked around her skirts with an expression that twisted something deep in him. Not pity, but recognition. Like a ghost he'd forgotten how to mourn. "We don't take in strays," he said at last, voice low. She flinched. "Didn't ask to be taken in. Just offering work. We can sleep in the barn." The girl coughed once, a sharp little bark like something her lungs had been carrying too long. Calder looked past the woman to the wagon in the distance. One wheel cracked, canvas half-collapsed like a fallen lung. "You from around here?" he asked. "Nowhere folks brag about." The sun dipped lower, drawing long shadows across the porch. He glanced down at her boots, scuffed, one lace missing. Then at the girl, who was shivering despite the heat. The child had something in her eyes that pulled at him, like watching a colt stand too soon. "You heard what they say about me?" she asked. Calder nodded. "I've heard worse." Silence stretched thin between them. Then Ruthie took a step forward, her doll swinging from her hand. She didn't speak, just looked at him like she already knew the answer and was waiting for him to catch up to it. He stepped aside. "The bunkhouse is dry," he said. Temperance Lee didn't thank him. She just nodded once, her chin tight, and guided her daughter past him. As they crossed the threshold, the air shifted, like something long shut had remembered how to breathe. Calder stood for a moment, listening to the echo of their steps in the empty house. He looked at the empty chair. It no longer seemed so lonely. And behind him, the door eased itself shut. By late August, the land had turned brittle underfoot. Like it, too, had forgotten softness. The rains had skipped Dry Creek that year, leaving cracks in the ground and tempers that snapped without warning. Calder watched the horizon each morning, hat low, hoping for clouds but finding only dust and the quiet rhythm of chores done without complaint. Temperance rose before dawn. She moved through the house like someone careful not to be seen, but everything she touched stayed better afterward. The squeaky cabinet hinge, the slant of light through the kitchen window, the smell of cornbread rising where must had settled before. She never asked questions, never lingered in a room too long. But Calder noticed how her hands hesitated before reaching for things that weren't hers. Like the doorframe, like a man's coffee mug. The girl, Ruthie, had made a friend of the land quicker than her mother. She wandered the yard with bare feet and humming lips, placing wildflowers on fence posts and chicken coops like she was blessing the place one bloom at a time. Calder found her once whispering to a milk cow with its leg bound in splints, her voice soft as prayer. She looked up and grinned, and he felt something loosen in him he didn't have a name for. But the town noticed. They always did. He heard it first at the mercantile. Hushed voices, too sharp to be mistaken for kindness. "She'll trap him same as she trapped that gambler. Hasn't got a decent name to stand on. And dragging that poor child along. Wicked, if you ask me. She's trouble. Pretty kind. The kind men forget their wives for." Calder said nothing. He bought his nails and beans and left with silence bricked around his ribs. That night, at supper, Temperance didn't eat much. Ruthie picked at her biscuit, humming under her breath. The wind stirred through the open window, carrying the scent of juniper and something else. Judgment, maybe. Or fae. He found her outside after dark, splitting kindling by lantern glow. Her sleeves were rolled, and sweat marked her temples. "You could have left that," he said. She didn't stop swinging. Idle hands invite too much thinking. He stood there watching her. "They are talking. You know that." She paused, axe held midair. "They always do. You want to leave?" She set the axe down gently, like it was a child she was putting to bed. "Only ever left when I was asked to." Calder opened his mouth, but Ruthie's scream split the night. Sharp, panicked, alive. They ran, breath and boots pounding the yard, and found her beside the barn, pointing into the dark. A rattler had coiled near the chicken coop, fangs gleaming under moonlight. Before Calder could move, Temperance stepped forward, snatched a hoe from the wall, and in one swift motion, ended it. The snake fell quiet. Ruthie clung to her skate, sobbing. Calder stared at the dead thing, then at the woman standing tall over it. Something in him, old, buried deep, shifted toward her. The storm came down from the high country without warning, the kind that folds sky into soil and makes the earth forget where it ends. Calder felt it before it hit. Air thickening, horses restless, a pressure behind his eyes like a memory pressing too hard. The ranch darkened fast, clouds swallowing the sun like ink in water. Inside, Temperance was braiding Ruthie's hair, murmuring lullabies with more rhythm than tune. Calder watched them from the doorframe, his hat in hand. The girl laughed softly, and it rattled something in him, something he hadn't known was still alive. Then the wind slammed the shutters open. They rushed to tie them down, Ruthie squealing with thrill until a gust tore the doll from her hands. It flew across the yard, cartwheeling like a feather on fire. Before anyone could stop her, she was gone, barefoot into the storm, chasing her one small possession like it held her whole past. "Ruthie!" Temperance shouted, already running. Calder grabbed his coat and lantern, heart stuttering with dread. They fanned out beneath the boiling sky, calling her name between gusts. Rain pelted hard, stinging like judgment. The grass bent low. Calder pushed through brush and shadow, lantern swinging, until he heard a cough, a soft, strangled sound that brought him to his knees. She was curled beneath a lightning-struck oak, soaked and shaking, eyes wide with fear and faith both. She still clutched the doll, sodden and torn, but her face lit up the moment she saw him. "Didn't want her to be lost again," she said. He lifted her gently, wrapping her in his coat. The doll dropped into the mud. He picked it up too. Back at the house, Temperance met them at the door, her hands trembling, eyes bright with terror. "You found her," she whispered, voice cracking. He didn't speak, just passed the child into her arms. Ruthie clung tight, sobbing now, all the courage drained. Temperance held her and rocked, the storm still hammering the windows, but softer now, somehow, less wild. Later, Calder sat by the fire, the rag doll drying on the hearth. He reached out and smoothed its tangled hair with 2 fingers, careful, as if it was something sacred. Temperance came beside him, shoulders stiff with worry and something else, hope, maybe. He handed her a cup of coffee. She took it, fingers brushing his. "I don't need a cook," he said. She didn't flinch. "I'd stay for her sake," she answered, "unless I'm unwelcome." He looked at the girl asleep on the cot, her breath steady again. "You're not," he said. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them, warming more than the room. Weeks later, Ruthie rode a paint pony across the yard, arms wide like wings. The sun crowned her, and Calder leaned against the fence, eyes softer than they'd been in years. Some stories come quiet, not with gunfire, but with a knock, a child's laughter, and the grace to stay. If you ever hear such a knock, open the door.